Hello, welcome to my channel. My name, as always, is Alexander and I'm about to review The Time Traveller's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. Now don't be deceived by the cover. Although it does have Time Traveller in the title, this is not a science fiction. It's a romance. It's a standard love story between two people, but with one heck of a twist. Actually, why am I even reviewing this? If you're a girl, chances are that you've already either read the book or seen the film, and if you're a boy, then you're probably going to think, romance? Nah, can't be bothered to read it. But I thought the title sounded intriguing, so I decided to read it, and I really didn't regret it, because this is a fantastic book. Allow me to illustrate the plot here. This is the story about Henry and Claire, and this is time. Claire is a completely normal human being. Henry, however, is a time traveller. But sometimes, at random points, he will suddenly jump back or forwards in time and stay there for a while. That could be anything from a few hours to several days. And then jump back to the present. It should be said that Henry doesn't enjoy this because, first of all, he cannot control when it happens. It just happens spontaneously. And second, he cannot bring anything with him, be it money, food, clothes. He jumps back and he then has to fight to survive until he comes back. Now, as you can imagine, that makes things quite interesting and confusing as well. Because, for example, Henry and Claire meet each other for the first time at two different points. When Claire's 6, she suddenly meets this 36-year-old Henry from the future. Henry already knows Claire because in the future they're married. Throughout her childhood, Claire will meet Henry several times because he keeps jumping back to her childhood. And only when she is 20 does she then meet young Henry, who has never seen Claire before. The reason I think this is a fantastic book is because you can read it on two different levels. First, there's on the superficial level. This is just a love story between two people who, despite their unfortunate circumstances, are doing their best to lead a normal life. I don't really know what the extract is going to be about yet, but I'd imagine it's going to be something about trying to fit in with the rest of society. And as a story as such, this is already a great book. It's a mind-blowing concept, and the author has really done her best to exploit this concept. But that's just the surface of the book. If you dig a bit deeper and try and pay attention to detail and read the text carefully, you'll start to notice that there are certain recurring symbols and underlying themes throughout the book. Birds, for example. You've got descriptions of birds several places in the book, and the art that Claire's doing is centred around birds and wings and flying. And Henry loves birds and even goes to a bird museum in the beginning of the book. And what concepts do birds normally symbolise? Freedom. And this is because not only is this book about Henry and Claire's attempts to live a normal life, it's also about their quest for a certain kind of freedom. Because due to Henry's time travelling, they are sometimes trapped within time itself. Okay, that sounded a bit freaky. Let me just elaborate on that. Sometimes when Henry goes back to his past, he tells himself something so that his younger self will then know that this something is going to happen, and that then becomes predetermined. Or sometimes Henry will go back to the past and try to change something, but then it turns out that what he changes actually turns out to be what would happen in the first place. Example. Henry tells young Claire that in the future they're married. Young Claire then goes on to tell young Henry that this is going to happen. And so from that point onwards, being married has become part of their destiny. Now that's not to say they do want to get married, but it's like now it's something inevitable that they cannot change. That then raises questions about determinism, free will, and whether you can actually choose to do something or whether your destiny is fixed, and whether when you go back in time you can actually change something or not. It's very difficult to write a consistent story that involves time travel, and yet in my opinion, Audrey Niffenegger has succeeded. So this is what I mean when I say that you can read the book on two levels. First, just the superficial level where you read it as a story, and then the more deeper level where you're actually analysing the book and paying attention to all the details and realising the philosophical issues that the book discusses. So yes, it should be clear that I like this book, but I can't just keep praising it, and I'm going to have to point out that there's one disadvantage. It's very thick. You don't realise it when you first just grab the book, but this is in fact more than 500 pages of this kind of writing. And given that this book is in essence just the life story of two people, you may find that a bit dull in the long run. especially since you already have sort of an idea of what's about to happen because Henry has already time travelled to the future. I certainly didn't find that it dragged on, but just warning you. Also, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say that the ending is somewhat open. It's quite clear what has happened, but it's not made explicit exactly what is going to happen after the book has ended. So in some sense, it's open to interpretation. Any concluding remarks? Yes. If you've seen the film, then don't let that stop you from reading the book. Because from what I've heard, they left out quite a lot of details. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. Because how can you possibly include something that's this long into a film that's less than 2 hours? Anyway, that ends my review of The Time Traveller's Wife. Next book review coming up next week.